There we go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our, end of November, beginning of December Zoomcast. My name is Robert Crowder. I'm going to be one of the presenters today. On behalf of all of us at the Benefits Trust, we'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you very much for coming. We're going to set a record today, and you guys are all going to be, or you folks are all going to be part of it. We're going to have, we had over 200 people register, so we'll see how many people show up. But it's going to be the biggest group that we've had on a Zoomcast to date. We've been doing these Zoomcasts for many, a couple of years now, since really COVID started. We used to do webinars, but now we're doing Zoomcasts. And we find them to be very beneficial for everybody that attends. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. And at the end of the session today, you're going to get an email with a CE credit, or sometime in the near future, you're going to get an email with a CE credit. You're also going to get You're also going to get enrolled in our Trusted Advisor newsletter. If you don't already receive that, you will receive that. That comes out once a month. We've done over 150 consecutive months of those newsletters. So you're going to get that. And, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking back in time, and I've been in this insurance business licensed since 1988. The Benefits Trust has started coming up on our 30th anniversary. And I've attended lots of sessions like this. And I think, oh, if we can mute everybody, that would be great. But I think if we get one good.
Hey, Rob, just unmute yourself. Sorry, you got muted.
You know, if we're in these sessions and we get one good idea, I think it's time well spent. But hopefully today we're pretty excited, and I think we'll get more than one good idea. As well as that, I want to remind everybody that we've got some sessions coming up in early January, January 9th, 11th, and 17th. And the topic there is going to be executive benefits, meaningful executive benefits. So we're excited about that presentation coming up. But let's stay focused on what we've got going on today. First of all, a couple of quick introductions. Joining us from the Benefits Trust, Miss Carrie Lane is in the house. Mike Ignatz is in the house. And Rob Crowder, my son, is in the house. So if you've got questions, please throw them in the chat box so everybody can see, and we'll get to those questions throughout the presentation, or, you know, one of the folks from the Benefits Trust will answer them, and or we'll get back to you offline. It depends on the question, of course. So again, we're pretty excited to be here, or we're really excited to be here today, and we've got our special guest presenter, Melissa Blanchette, who I'll introduce a little bit more formally in a few moments. So let's get started here, and let me share my screen, if I could be so kind as doing that. And let me close that. Close that. Can everybody see that?
Yep, looks good.
Great. So today we want to talk about the ins and outs in travel insurance. One of the things that I forgot to mention off the top is at the end of the presentation today as well, you're going to get a really short survey. It takes about 90 seconds to fill out. Please fill it out and give us some feedback on how we did today, how we can do better in January and February and March next year. But in addition to that, there's an opportunity to give us some feedback on what other future subjects you'd like to see today. This is feedback that we have received from you folks over the last couple of months. You wanted to see something on travel insurance. So that's one of the reasons why we're putting this slide or put this Zoomcast together today. So our agenda today, let me flip there. Our agenda today is we want to talk a little bit about the Benefits Trust, sort of who we are and why we're doing this. We want to talk about the marketplace and the unknown in the marketplace. We want to talk about travel coverage. We want to talk about pre-travel responsibilities. We use GreenShield as our travel partner, and Can Assistance is the concierge service that they use as well. So we want to talk about what the concierge service role is in travel insurance. Additionally, we want to talk about plan member experience. And this came clear to me when I was putting this presentation together, the opportunity for you to add value. And so we want to spend a little bit of time on that. And I think there's some great prospecting opportunities for you as well that I want to expand on as well. And then, of course, we want to talk about we want to have some time for some discussion. If you have a question throughout the presentation today, either put your hand up with the little emoji or put it in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get to it. So about the Benefits Trust, just really quickly, this isn't a commercial about us, but we started on January 1st, 1994. So we're coming up to a month away from our 30th anniversary. We're a full service third-party benefit administration company. We're the largest independently owned TPA in Canada. We provide fully customizable employee benefit solutions. We have exceptional client experience. That's what a lot of our clients certainly tell us when we interact with them, as we do on an ongoing basis. And we've got long-term relationships with all of the major insurance carriers. We're not stuck to one particular insurance partner. We deal with many, many, many insurance and service providers. And our target market is really working with advisors like you, with clients with 1 to 100 employees. And if you've been on our previous sessions, you know why we're in this market, because that's where the money is, in my opinion, because that's where 440,000 opportunities are in Southern Ontario. That's so there, we do deal with larger clients, but that's really where our market is in that 1 to 100 space. So let's get into this, because we've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. We will be finishing right at 11 o'clock, but if you want to stick around for a few minutes afterwards, we're happy to answer some questions. Well, the travel insurance marketplace, it's interesting. There are many options available. Many people have travel insurance added on to a benefit plan. That's, many of you are certainly here today because of that. But there's also an awful lot of online opportunities. So we happen to use Metapack, or we refer people to Metapack, a great company in Toronto. They do an excellent job. There's Goose Insurance. There's a bunch of other insurance companies out there that do it online, but we like to use Metapack. You can also have travel insurance on your credit card. I've got an American Express card. I've got a Visa card. I probably have, 3 or 4 different travel insurance solutions built into my credit cards. But it's amazing. I had a call from a friend of mine who's a professional travel agent, and she was talking about them having to sell or having to offer travel insurance. And in their case, it was through Manulife. So their agency required them to offer this Manulife travel insurance. So we have unlicensed people having to sell travel insurance. So it's a crazy world out there. But one thing that I've learned, it's often misunderstood and confusing to the clients and the consumers. They think they have it. They think they've got it. They think they're covered. They have this somewhat of a peace of mind, but it's often confusing because it's really small print and there's lots of pages. But mistakes can often lead to huge liabilities for the clients and the consumers. They think they've got this certain type of coverage in their bag, so to speak, but they find out too late and they don't. And it can be a huge, huge liability for the client or the customer or the consumer. And you can't turn on the news without seeing frequent media horror stories about people that are traveling and they get injured or they get sick or whatever the circumstances are. And, they're out tens or hundreds or quite a few hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's an important, travel insurance is vitally important as part of what it is that you do as a professional advisor. So, it's funny, I was talking to Melissa about this earlier, who's going to be presenting in a moment, but travel insurance is like a car jack. The majority of people that are on this call today have a car of some sort, right? A car or a truck or an SUV, and included in there somewhere is a car jack. So if you've got a Ford, I don't even know what Ford's models are. If you've got a Ford Edge, for example, built into your car somewhere is a car jack that somebody else made. Ford didn't make the car jack. They bought the car jack from another company, and it's built into the trunk or underneath the trunk or wherever it is. But you have one in your car. You don't know where it is. You don't really know how to use it. It's always inconvenient when it's needed. You're always on your way somewhere and you get a flat tire, so it's inconvenient. And it's usually when you're on your way somewhere important. But it's interesting because when it's used properly, it can save your butt. Like, you can get out of a jam. But often it's not used properly because, first of all, you got to find it, and then you've got to try to understand how to use it. And if you don't understand how to use it right, it doesn't solve your problem. It creates more problems. So travel insurance is kind of like that. It's you've got the coverage, or you think you have the coverage through your benefit plan, or you think you have the coverage through your gold American Express card or whatever it is, right? But all of a sudden, when you go to use it, it may not be what you expect it to be. So travel insurance is like a car jack. The cost of U.S. hospital services, as we all know, we've all been around enough that we know that it can be catastrophic. It can be, just hundreds of thousands of dollars instantly. My mom, when she was alive, she was an older woman, and she had some coffee spilt on her at a restaurant by accident. And it came down on her shoulder and on her arm, and she was shaken up. And she went to the hospital because the restaurant sent her to the hospital to get checked out. And she was in there for probably about 40 minutes in the hospital. They checked out her arm. They gave her some ointment for her arm. They, monitored her blood pressure. They took care of her. It was all great. But the bill was something along the lines of $10,000, for a 40-minute visit. It was just absolutely amazing. The other thing I've learned in putting this presentation together is, hospitals charge for everything, right down to Band-Aid fees and tongue depressors, right? They're going to charge you for the tongue depressor and charge you for the Band-Aid. But the three most expensive states for Canadians or for anybody to get hospital care or emergency care is Hawaii, California, and Florida. Where do Canadians travel in the winter? Hawaii, California, and Florida. It's amazing. The other thing that I found out is, OHIP is always, well, I knew this, but OHIP is always the first payer. But what I didn't realize is what OHIP pays is about 3 to 6% of the out-of-country costs. Like the out-of-country, like the bill that you'd get from a hospital, if you would, OHIP is going to pay that first behind the scenes, but it's only about 3 to 6%. So call it 5% of what the bill would be. So a minor medical event can be financially challenging in an instant. And we all know that, and that's why we're here. So you've all heard me chat for a while, but I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Melissa Blanchette. She's the account manager for travel solutions in GreenShield Canada. I think her title, Melissa's title, is not corresponding with what she does. She's in charge of travel insurance for GreenShield, and we've had a lot of conversations back and forth about this presentation and about the offerings that we certainly have at the Benefits Trust. And I found Melissa to be knowledgeable, professional, and really on point. So anyways, I want to turn this over to Melissa. Where's Melissa? Come on up come on up to the podium here, Melissa, and and let's start.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks everybody for having me this morning. I think it's really timely that Robert put this together sort of right at the cusp of our travel season. That's going to be starting, well, probably started a couple of weeks ago. So this will be a really good sort of overview so that everybody's got a good amount of information in their back pocket to help your members. So this first slide, so know your coverage before traveling. We all know, historically, Canadians often don't take the time to review their plan and assume everything will be taken care of when they're traveling. They're not used to paying for things in Canada. They're not used to paying for things anywhere else. So as Rob mentioned earlier, it's not until they're actively dealing with a medical issue like that carjack that they become aware of their coverage. So there are three things. So the first bit there is trip duration. So there are three things to understand about trip duration. The number of days that they're allowed to be out of their province of residence. 30-day travel coverage doesn't mean they should plan on coming home on the 30th day. Flights get canceled. Members could be stuck abroad with no health coverage. And number three, if members don't have enough days in their group plan to cover their trip duration, they must purchase top-up coverage prior to leaving their province of residence. Most carriers in Canada are not licensed to operate in other countries. So if they're caught out in Greece, they're having a great time, I want to stay for an extra week, I need an extra week's worth of healthcare coverage, you can't buy it at the time. You've got to come home. The second thing there, the number to call, contact information. This may sound really simple, but knowing how to best contact the travel provider from the country you're visiting is really important. Research how to get a line out to Canada, whether it's toll-free or collect. If you're calling collect, know how to get a human operator. The robotic options that work in North America don't generally apply overseas. So for example, if you're calling collect from Europe, it usually involves dialing 00 to get an international operator. Many countries have poor telephony infrastructure. For example, Mexico, they drop calls all the time. You can be on a call, it will cut off. Is it the fault of the travel carrier? Absolutely not. It's because Mexico doesn't have very good infrastructure. So make sure you've got the email address for the travel carrier that you need. Cell phones can also pose an issue. So if you're having trouble using the collect option, members can dial direct, get an emergency assistance agent on the line, and ask the agent to call them back immediately to avoid long distance charges. Every single carrier should do this. For the Canadian government travel advisories, travelers should go to travel.gc.ca to review the Canadian government's current travel advisories and how they might affect assistance and coverage. There are generally a few pieces of language in any policy that excludes coverage for falling ill with a disease in areas the Canadian government deemed a health risk, or exclude coverage for treatments due to acts of war. Further to this, there's no guarantee that CanAssistance would be able to provide assistance in the areas affected, meaning coordinating medical care could be an issue, or extricating a member for repatriation to a Canadian hospital if the person's in the middle of a war zone or something like that. CanAssistance is available for all for the above pre-trip inquiries. And I really, really encourage that when you're having the conversations with your members, to have that conversation. Call CanAssistance before your trip. So pre-travel.
Sorry, Melissa, it's really interesting. Just that point of know how to make a call. Like it's funny, you press favorites and you make a call, right? But when you're in a different country, it's not that easy sometimes.
No, for sure. And every single country is different. I mean, when you're going to, first world nations, you're generally fine. But when you're going to areas that are a little less developed, you really need to understand how to get a hold of not only medical care, but getting a call out to home to making sure that you've got that support.
On the travel advisories, if I could ask a quick question, what happens if you're traveling and then all of a sudden unrest happens?
Right. So a good something that's good to do prior to going away is actually registering with the Government of Canada to let them know, when you're going to be traveling. They'll get your information and they'll send you emails if there's anything that happens while you're away. Generally, what they say is, of course, if something happens while you're away, is your coverage in effect? Of course it is. You had absolutely no way of knowing that something was going to become a travel advisory when you left. But what the Canadian government likes to say is try to get the first plane home. So know that there is now a travel advisory in effect. You now know about it. You should make your way home.
Awesome.
Does that help? Okay. Next slide, Rob. Perfect. Okay, pre-travel responsibilities. This, again, sounds simple, but review your travel coverage to the point that ensuring your family is covered, your entire family is covered, and check that their information is correct. Simple things like date of birth and name spelling is really important, because if you're trying to contact your travel carrier and they cannot validate that you are who you say you are, it's going to delay the process. Another tip is to take everyone's health cards and a credit card with you. Super important. Some countries are now demanding payment prior to discharge, and they will hold the person's personal effects until payment is made. We are hearing a lot of this coming out of Mexico. So that's just a bit of a tip. For the next two bullet points, the review stability period and review pre-existing condition clause, folks tend to get a bit confused between stability and pre-existing. The reason behind these clauses is to further support the fact that travel coverage is in essence for an emergency situation only. So this is defined as a sudden and unforeseen medical condition that requires treatment. So a pre-existing condition means any medical condition that exists prior to the date of the person's departure. An emergency excludes treatment of a pre-existing condition that was not completely stable for the 90-day period preceding their departure. A medical condition is considered stable when a person meets all of the medical criteria during the 90-day period before their departure. And those medical criteria usually involve something like no new treatment was prescribed or recommended, there's no changes to the existing treatment, The medical condition hasn't become worse. There's no more severe symptoms. There's been no hospitalization or referral to a specialist. They have not been required any tests or investigations. There's no planned or pending treatment, and there's not been any change to any existing prescribed drug regimen, including increase, decrease, or stoppage altogether. So to alleviate any of these concerns, we always advise that people who are unsure whether they fall into a potential stability issue, call CAN Assistance. Again, this is going to be a reoccurring theme. Call CAN Assistance well before they leave. Their pre-travel agents will walk the member through the appropriate questions, and if necessary, they will send the member a medical questionnaire that their physician can fill out and return to the medical staff at CAN Assistance. They will then review it and give the member an answer in writing as to whether their condition meets the qualifications of stability or not, which really reinforces a good feeling with the plan member to say, okay, they've reviewed it. If something happens to me while I'm away for this same issue, I'm good, I'm covered, because technically I am stable. CAN Assistance will then also review with them when to call for assistance. Can you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay, it goes without saying, call as soon as possible. You must speak with a CAN Assistance agent before seeing a doctor outside of your province of residence. If it's an emergency, you're unable to call, go to the nearest hospital or clinic, get treatment, get looked after. When you found the medical help, contact them. We'll open your assistance file and we'll proceed from there. It doesn't mean you won't be eligible. We just like to say, in order for us to best serve you, call us as soon as possible. The last bullet there is have someone else in your travel party call as soon as possible if you can't, and they will definitely communicate with that person.
So, and again, Melissa, you're talking about CAN Assistance specifically, but this is any travel concierge service that like
true.
other insurance companies have different companies that they deal with, and it's the same sort of process, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's more making sure that the member is supported, that they're going to the right area, and they can start making contact with the family members and medically manage the case.
And if we go back to the last slide for a minute, maybe I can just, let me just flip back. Just a real quick question here. Okay, great. I take, blood pressure medication because I'm fat and old and drink too much. But hey, I go to the doctor and he's, it's just a 5 milligram change. Okay. Am I not stable?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. So this is where it gets a bit dicey, because there are definite side effects that can happen with any either increase or decrease in dosage. Those side effects are different per person, and it depends on what your comorbidities could be. It depends on your previous history. It depends on where you live, what your diet's like, all of those sorts of things. So if you had an issue while you were away directly due to a 5 milligram dosage increase, there is a very good possibility that your claim would not be paid.
Okay, so that's important to know, everybody, because it's just a small change. It's no big deal. Well, that is, it can be. Now, on that note, I fell off my bar stool. Does that have anything to do with my change in medication, or will all claims be denied, or because of that change in the medication, or is it hey, this accident had nothing to do with it?
Great question. No, what they will do is, regardless of what's happened to you, regardless of what issue you end up having on your trip, they are going to request all of your, we call them PCP records, and they're your primary care physician records. So they're going to take a look at, depending on what your issue was, does it have anything to do with your pre-existing condition? I fell over a bar stool. I fell off of a bar stool. I broke my wrist. Does that have anything to do with my heart condition? No. So that is going to be fully covered. It's only when you were drinking at the bar, the alcohol sort of interacted with the medication dosage increase that you had, causing like a syncope issue, falling off, that could be construed as a pre-existing condition. So it's all part and parcel of getting all of that information together, and they have to adjudicate the claim when the claim comes in. And we'll get to that in a second too.
Yeah, but I think that's an important point. It's important to be stable when you travel. It's as simple as that. And even a quick trip, it doesn't matter how long the duration of the trip is, but even a quick trip. Great, we've done this. So next slide is, thanks, Melissa.
No problem. And actually, Rob, you bring a good point. And I know we were chatting about this the other day, the quick trip. So there's a lot of us that live on border cities. So I'm going to go over to, Target for a few hours and I get hit by a car crossing the road. Please make sure you have your travel coverage in effect when you go over there, because they're not going to repatriate you immediately back to Canada. Even if you're 20 minutes over the border, they're going to get you to the closest emergency care.
Yep.
So quick trips are important as well.
Yeah, and it's amazing because a lot of people, hey, I'm just going down to the Buffalo Bills game, or I'm just going down to the Buffalo Sabres game, or I'm just going across to Target, as you mentioned, to pick up some things, depending on
where. Of course,
where.
I go directly for the shopping, but it's fine.
Yeah, but it's just amazing. I see Maureen Campbell's got a question. Maureen, sorry, you're still muted, or we can't hear you. Nope. Turn up your volume, or. Oh, she's going to plug something in here. Maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll come back to Maureen in a second.
Would you like me to continue?
Oh,
any better?
There you go. Now we can hear you. Okay.
All right. I think I might have started something in the chat. This is a question for Melissa. I did an inquiry recently on stability and someone who was having weaned off a medication. They were getting healthier, and that was deemed to be unstable as well. So I just wanted to confirm, because I put it in the chat and someone's like, is that really true? And I think for a lot of us, we thought positive changes don't constitute unstable.
That's a great question. The positive changes. Okay, so my blood pressure medication went down by five milligrams because I've lost so much weight and I'm so fit. But that so whether it's up or down, it's not stable. Correct, Melissa?
That's correct. And honestly, Maureen, that is a great question. Again, it depends on the comorbidities. So depending on what your doctor is looking at the time, if you have a decrease in dosage, great. That might mean that your heart condition is getting better. What does that mean for any other comorbidity issues that you've got going on? So when we say each claim is completely separate, they actually look at each person's primary care physician records and the hospital discharge records. All of those things come into play when they're deciding whether a person was stable or not. Do we err on the side of, oh, if you did have a decrease, you're becoming healthier, and this really had nothing to do with the issue that you had? Absolutely. That's also true. So both sides of that question are true. It just depends on that individual person's medical condition at the time of claim.
Hey, Gordon, let's go to you real quick, but we've got a lot to cover. So let's go to you real quick.
If the supplier has changed, but the medication remains the same dosage and the same type of medication, would that constitute the change as well?
Did you mean from like TiVo to APO, like two different types of drug? No, that does not consider a change.
Great question, Gordon. Thank you.
Good question. Okay, so particularly when we're talking about CAN Assistant's role and the fact that they are available 24/7. Again, we said toll-free or collect. The representative will open a file. It takes a couple of minutes. So this is where people have to understand that this could, depending on your situation, where you are, who you are, it could take 10 to 15 minutes to open a file. They're going to direct you to the nearest clinic or hospital that offers the best available care. So depending on where you are, they'll figure out which facility has the expertise on staff for your issue and meet the requirements for customer service. Can Assistance is very particular also about customer service. They want to make sure that if there are two hospitals with two really good groups of cardiac care physicians, they're going to send you to the one with better customer service, better communication strategies, all of those sorts of things. They will confirm whether your emergency is covered at the time, and if possible, handle the payment directly so you don't have to pay up front. So they're going to contact the receiving facility to alert them of your arrival and review the terms and conditions of your eligibility and provide their billing information. Sometimes this comes with a guarantee of coverage, a guarantee of payment, whatever the hospital requires to make sure that the person is getting the best care possible. They're going to assess the condition and make plans for follow-up treatment if further care is required. So they're going to inform you or your family as to whatever the next steps are. And the goal always is to make sure that you get the best care, but to repatriate you back to your home province if further treatment is required once you're stable to travel. Some of the issues that you probably all have heard of is the current hospital bed shortage in Canada. So the situation right now and for the past couple of years has been a bit dire. So sometimes that makes finding a doctor in Canada to receive you a difficult situation. It could take days or weeks, depending on what your situation is, whether you're being repatriated by commercial flight, whether it's air ambulance, whether it's air ambulance at sea level, how many stops you have to make, all of those sorts of things. So there's a tremendous amount of coordination that happens on the back end and behind the scenes with any travel carrier and with Can Assistance, for sure.
Next slide.
Yes, please. Plan member experience. This one is very simple. We've just got 3 little boxes there. It can be smooth or bumpy. If you're prepared, it's smooth. If you're unprepared, it's bumpy. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Learning of your plan in the midst of an emergency is a very stressful and it's a very poor experience. It doesn't matter how good the outcome is. If a plan member has any poor experience with not understanding what's going on, not knowing how to call, all of those things, they're not going to be very happy. So the long and short of it is make sure they're educated. They've got to take an active role in their travel coverage. Encourage that they take an active role. Again, part of the reoccurring theme is please call Can Assistance before you leave. Any questions? Super helpful. They will be there. They will be there to guide you. And most travel carriers are like that as well.
And it's interesting, Melissa, I know we've been dealing with some claims right now that are very bumpy. And it's the reason why they're bumpy is this particular person was traveling and they went and had 2 or 3 different interactions with a hospital and then came back. And after they were back from their trip for a couple of weeks, then they go, oh yeah, we've got out of country coverage. I think I'll submit those claims. So it was done way after the fact, and it has been a bumpy ride because it was actually, in this case, it was a daughter saying, Mom, I had these expenses and just put them on the credit card and, the quote unquote emergency credit card. Now mom's trying to claim them under their travel insurance, which is not an issue. And many of the claims have been paid, but it's just been a bumpy, long road because the process wasn't followed correctly.
Exactly. And actually, I know the one that you're talking about. And part of the issue is that the mom wasn't fully informed of the fact that their travel coverage was only 60 days. And the daughter was out of the province longer than 60 days. And again, part of the issue was, she was stateside. She went to the hospital, didn't call the travel carrier beforehand, didn't set anything up, went wherever, and she was claiming after the fact. So like Rob said, there was a couple that were paid because she had those treatments within those the trip duration guidelines, but the ones outside of the trip duration guidelines, the hospital that she went to said, no worries, everything will be taken care of. They had no idea what her plan said, how long her plan was, what was included. They did not help the situation. So it was kind of a perfect storm. I agree.
Yeah.
But the main issue is that they didn't follow protocol for the best plan member experience. So now the mom is going to be out of pocket
Yeah.
for a couple of claims, which is, it's really unfortunate.
But it's not being prepared.
It's not being prepared.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. Okay, plan member eligibility. So I know I said earlier, claims are adjudicated at the time of claim. So it's really hard to predict. A couple of those really great questions earlier, I had an increase in dosage, I had a change in brand name, I had a decrease in dosage, but claims are adjudicated at the time of claim. So everything is dependent on what your medical status was before you left and at the time of the claim. You must review the minimum eligibility requirements of the travel policy, the minimum hours worked. The next point is really important as well. Watch out for parents, non-dependent children, family members, and part-time employees. Not everybody's going to be covered underneath this claim, and they need to understand who is and is not covered. And ensure the client is aware of the eligibility requirements of the plan. So look over the policy, read the documents, answer any questions that they might have. The last point is probably the most important. So dependent children attending school outside of Canada. This does not mean it grants them an expat situation. This is a travel plan. So if an emergency occurs and further treatment is required after the emergency ends for the student, they will need to be repatriated back to Canada. They cannot elect to have further treatment at their location to avoid missing school. This happens more often than you think. There are a lot of Canadian kids that go down south on sports scholarships. And so, you know, son or daughter gets hurt, broken wrist, they found that the x-ray after the bone had been casted was not, did not confirm union. So they were going to have wrist surgery inside of 6 months. Well, parents are saying, well, I want them to have the surgery at the hospital in the States. Well, no, this is now elective and it's no longer emergent. You need to come home, have that treatment done, and then return to school. So that's something that parents need to be reminded of as well, that this is not an expat situation.
Talk about, if we can continue down that same train for a moment, or that same track for a moment. If a standard 60-day out-of-country travel policy, does the student have to come back every 60 days, or can you get extensions because they're students because of the circumstances?
Again, they would have to purchase the top-up coverage, which is totally possible. They can purchase top-up coverage before they leave for school. But it doesn't change the policy language of the plan.
Nope. Understood.
So they've got 60 days, but they're going to, I'm making this up, China. They're going to China for a year to study. You can get an extension to make sure that student is covered. But if something happens, they will be brought back to Canada for further treatment. They won't be allowed to stay to have further surgeries and that sort of thing done.
The party's over.
The party's over.
But there's another thing that's important to note, everybody, on this and this is something I learned because a friend of mine's son goes to college in the US. You have to apply to OHIP as well, because if you're out of the country for longer than X number of days, your coverage ceases. Or if you're out of the province for more than X number of days, your coverage ceases. So you've got to apply to OHIP for that extension as well.
That's absolutely true. And what will happen at OHIP is most of the time they approve you. They approve the extension, and they will give you a special health card, and they'll send it to you, and it's got a different health card number on it for you to be able to travel. So again, really important that everybody brings their health cards to prove that they've got provincial coverage. No travel coverage is eligible without having provincial coverage in place.
We got a couple questions here. Mary Frances White, jump on in. Gordon, you've already asked one, so I'm going to go to Mary first.
Morning, thank you. Just wanted to clarify. So you spoke about being out of school, out of country for perhaps a scholarship for sports. So do they not have to clarify or disclose if the sport is, say, high risk? So somebody who might be doing hockey or say some type of, say, downhill skiing, that would add additional risk to the insurer as a result of that activity.
Absolutely. And that's where it's important to look at the policy language, because depending on the policy, they might have an exclusion, limitations or exclusions, and to say, we won't pay for anything that is considered high risk. And they usually have a list of the sports or the activities that are considered high risk. So yes, very important.
So
Thank you.
back to the point, Melissa, it's preparation that must be done in advance. It's understanding all of the terms of the policy and so on, and making the appropriate decisions based on the answers. This is not a one size fits all plan. And just because you have it on your group insurance plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is covered for everything.
That's right. And usually the schools in, mostly the schools in the US will have some sort of waiver. And if the student is saying, I've already got insurance coverage, I don't want to pay this exorbitant fee to the US school to provide insurance. And the waiver is usually very specific. And they'll say you have to have $25,000 of repatriation burial coverage. You have to have at least $1 million of medical insurance coverage. You must have, and all of these sorts of things. So there is always the opportunity for
people have been
the
calling
member.
for years for a caucus. I don't know why.
Sorry, someone
I don't know where you get your
Ted?
Melissa, you're gonna have to, Melissa, you'll have to unmute yourself, please.
No problem. No problem. So there's always the opportunity for the parent to actually purchase the insurance that's offered by the school. They can always do a compare and see if it's a good choice to actually grab that extra insurance. Did we want to go to Gordon?
Thanks, Melissa. It's not really a question. It's relative to the students who are traveling out of country, but also those who are traveling out of province. And it's important to note that past 6 months, you need to renew your OHIP. So where you're a student and on leave for over 6 months, very important to contact OHIP and make arrangements. The second thing is for students, they really need to get an individual policy, because ultimately most of the travel policies that we would deal with as an adult on a long trip, say 90 days, whatever, student situations are quite different. And as you've indicated in your comments, the schools will require that you have appropriate coverage.
Absolutely. And if I can just add on to your first point, the OHIP point, where we're sort of cushioned in Canada is that we've got interprovincial eligibilities when it comes to a Canadian traveling to another province. So if the student was going to BC and from Ontario and they were staying there for 8-9 months and they were not pardon me, they were not coming home, when the student gets to BC, they are actually able to apply for MSP coverage in BC so that they can get BC Medicare. They can get that as a Canadian citizen, that's fine. And there's not usually any sort of issue with that. If the student doesn't and they get hurt in BC, the BC hospital will bill OHIP for those interprovincial costs. So there isn't anything that the student would actually have to pay for. So it is good. There is a bit of a cushion there, but I totally agree, being aware that you need to know where your coverage is actually coming from is super important.
And again, it's about being prepared when you're traveling, and whether you're traveling, outside of the province or outside of the country, and especially if you're doing it for extended period of times, it's important. Gary, and John, I'm going to get to you guys in just a second. I got a couple more slides we want to go through here. But hey, Melissa, thank you very much. We want you to stick on the call if you could. But I want to talk about some of the opportunities that we have with travel coverage. And again, Melissa, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. And we're going to come back to some Q&A in a moment. But I see this as a huge opportunity for professional advisors. I see this as a huge opportunity to take an active role. You can, like one of the things that we always like to say is advise your clients to print and send multiple copies of their travel coverage and their travel card and share details with their travel party. So for example, myself, I enjoy traveling. My wife and I enjoy traveling very much. We have multiple copies of our travel coverage in all of our luggage. So it's in my knapsack, it's in my various pieces of luggage. So I don't have to think about it. So when I travel, I know where it is. And my wife, Michelle, knows where it is. So if we ever run into an issue, we've certainly not scrambling and looking for it. As well as that, I've got it on my email and I resend it to myself. So it's on my current, email right up front. There's opportunities for you as a professional advisor as well to tell your clients about this and tell your clients, your employees, or your clients' employees about this. Lunch and learns. I think one of the greatest things is a video. You can create a 5-minute video explaining just what we talked about today, summarizing what we talked about today. That video can be sent to all employees. That video the employees can send it on to their families and their family members. I don't think it's important to go into the details of if you're traveling as a student. If you're traveling as a student, the best thing to do is say call, because the circumstances are so, they can go in so many different directions. But have a real quick 5-minute video, easy with technology today to do that. But it's about ensuring clients are prepared, so they have a smooth ride. And one of the things that I when putting this presentation together, I said, create that client checklist, that client travel checklist, that template, brand it with your name on it, right? And you can give this to your clients, and they can give it to all of their employees. And everybody's heard about what Dave Patriarch does with the what is it, the Group Insurance Brokers Association and the checklist thing that he has going on, and how positive it is. Create a travel checklist so people are informed. Claims can be catastrophic. As as we've talked about, they can be very emotional, like incredibly emotional. And as Melissa was mentioning, they can be very complex. You're dealing with ambulances and air ambulances, repatriation, and finding a doctor. Yes, I live in Windsor, but the doctor might be in London, and that's not good for the family. But it's what has to be done. Language barriers well abroad. It's the unknown, right? And significant costs. But you as an advisor, this can come back and haunt you. It can take up hours and hours and hours and hours of your time. And it can be difficult to navigate because you're dealing with so many different players, and it's not just picking up the phone and solving a problem. And it can make you look unprofessional in an instant, because when you think about it and you go back to that, advisor, or sorry, the analogy of a carjack, right? Is it can ruin a relationship with a client. It can ruin a relationship with a client. So I think there's a really bid opportunity for professional advisors. And it was interesting because I was at on a call yesterday with an advisor and a prospect, and we were talking about travel insurance. And I said, geez, hasn't your existing advisor talked to you about this? And they said, no, we had no idea. And I go, well, this is some of the things that we do and makes us different and separates us from the others. And it was really interesting because the client was just absolutely amazed, but it's just a simple conversation you can have with prospects, and you can create this opportunity for yourself that I think a lot of people are missing. So my theme is, set your client up for travel success. You've got an opportunity to set your client up for travel success. Every single client or every single claim is underwritten at the time of claim. So you need to do that little bit of planning in advance to help them have a smooth transition, a smooth process should something happen. Communicate seasonally, communicate, at the beginning of the travel season being November, and then communicate, in June when people start traveling again. But there's a huge opportunity a huge opportunity. And as I like to say, no one ever got fired for adding value. John, you had a question.
Yes, my question relates to the 90-day stability clause.
Yep.
What are the best practices for clients or employers who have staff traveling to the US frequently, such as like truck drivers or things like that?
Great question, Melissa.
So there's generally a difference between regular travel and business travel. For business travel, people that are on the road like that all the time, you would sort of want to remove that stability clause because it's not within their, realm to just call in sick and not make the trip down to Texas with the truck or whatever. So you'd need to make sure that the policy language is indicative of what type of work that the person is doing. So usually the stability period, you really don't want that on there because they're not going to get covered for anything they leave the country with.
So in answer to the question, it's John, and I think it's a great question, is making sure that your client has the right coverage, right? And if 90% of their drivers are traveling, across the border, a standard off-the-shelf type of coverage is probably not appropriate, and you would have to find specialty coverage or specialty considerations from the insurance company, which the client is prepared to pay more for, but it's making sure that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. It's just not a throw-in. This is not a throw-in. Travel insurance is not a throw-in, right? Gary.
Good morning, and thank you, Melissa. This has been great. So I just recently upgraded my Visa card, and I got a lovely wording from Visa saying I now have this great coverage. I'm also a plan member on my wife's group plan, and the last trip I bought travel insurance through the agent because I got any reason cancellation coverage. So now I go away and I've got 3 plans in force. How does that get integrated, and how do the carriers know that the other plans exist at time of claim?
Great question. Yeah, really great question. So that's part of the call that you have. What you'll usually do is call the group carrier first. The group carrier is usually the one that has all of the relevant information. You can get a hold of them the quickest. You'll usually get the card with the travel information on it. When you call them, they will say, do you have other coverage? You will then list, I've got this credit card, I've got this individual plan. The first, there's 2 different things going on here: primary carrier and first payer. Whoever you call first is the carrier that's going to take care of you. It doesn't matter who it is. They will take care of you. What they will do then is coordinate everything on the back end with all of the information you've given them, and been able to call say you called Visa first. They would say, okay, then we're going to call Ken Assistance. We're going to let them know that, we're taking the file, but we're going to have to split this 3 ways. So whatever's eligible here, we're going to determine who's got what extra coverage, and we're going to make sure that everything is processed appropriately, of course, never with the intent of covering anything more than the 100%.
Okay, so just you recommend then the group carrier. So I'm going to Mexico. I'm curious about your comments about Mexico, because I have noticed the price of poker has gone up dramatically in Mexico in the last 12 months. So you would recommend calling the group carrier first and let them sort it out between Visa and the travel agent?
I would, just because they've usually got a clearer direction on what needs to happen. And they'll probably have a very good provider network involved, because what's happening right now with Mexico is Mexico used to price everything themselves. The bigger conglomerates in Mexico, like the Hospitans and everybody down there, they're now using US-based billing companies. So the prices have just gone up significantly, and they're not always waiting for travel coverage to actually be made eligible. So just be careful when you go down to Mexico. There are a couple of travel advisories on right now. And just be aware that when you go to a hospital, if you have to go to a hospital, try and call before you go to the hospital, if at all possible. That way the travel carrier is saying, don't go to this hospital, go to this one. we know you'll be taken care of. We've got relationships with them. We can get you out when needed. So just take all the precautions that you can.
Great,
Gary,
thank you.
I think it's a
Sorry.
great question. I think it's a great question, but you got to understand something. For you and in your particular situation, insurance is for selling, it's not for claiming. Okay, so let's stop that talk about claiming. You don't claim when you're down there because you're not going to get hurt. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. Maureen's had her hand up for a while. Let's jump to you, Maureen. Unmute.
Thanks, Rob. This was just following up in your conversation about education and reminders. One of the things that I try to, always stress is companies that are transitioning from one carrier to another for Jan 1.
Yeah.
So, it's wonderful. You might not have the registration and everything else live for employees on January 1st, but there's a good chance they're out of the country and their travel coverage has changed. So I always go to the carrier that's going to be in place for Jan 1 and get the travel cards for all the employees before they leave for the Christmas holidays, so that they know on January 1st, your coverage changes. Here's travel information, because they probably won't register for their stuff on Jan 1. They might not even get their welcome email from the carrier for January 1st. So it's just for me, it's always a panic that I think that there might be employees off on vacation somewhere and they run into an issue that spans Jan 1st. But I do have a question for Melissa about that. If the claim started before Jan 1 with the prior carrier's coverage, would the carrier continue that coverage till the person was
Yes.
issue was resolved? Okay, so it doesn't
Yes.
flip on January 1st.
No, that is
in process.
That is CLIA guidelines. We follow, every carrier that belongs to CLIA should be following CLIA guidelines. So any date of service prior to the changeover date should be handled by the prior carrier through to completion, because we all know travel claims can go on months, if not years.
Yeah.
They have to handle those. Yeah.
And one thing that's important to note, everybody, because we just had this situation, when the travel, and that's a great question, Maureen, when the travel insurance changes on, for example, January 1, the 60 days doesn't start. Okay, it's the date of departure. Yeah. Right. So if you leave on December 15th, new travels coverage starts on January 1st. It doesn't mean you get 60 days from January 1st. It's critical to note. All right, we've got time for one more question, then we're going to end the meeting, but we're going to stick around to ask or to continue the conversation. So, John, real quick question. Scott, we'll get to you in a moment.
Yes, Melissa, I'm hoping that you can answer a question regarding travelers coming to Canada as well. What's the situation in war zones where, like Ukraine, for example, people coming to Canada, they're getting out of there as soon as they can, when they can. Do they need coverage for coming into Canada, or will OHIP cover them?
No, you need OHIP replacement insurance if they're coming for any long period of time.
Yeah, and there's a refugee status that they can apply for.
Yeah, but that's
when they get here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they've got to have it when they get here.
It's a great question. Now we've got it's just about 11 o'clock. So everybody, please, let's take this opportunity to thank Melissa. She's a very, very busy lady, and you doing what you did today, I think, is just incredible. So thank you very much. And
thanks very much,
let's
Melissa.
give her a round of applause.
Great information.
Oh. Yeah. You're welcome. It helps me too. So the more education that's out there, the easier job my job becomes. So
it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being in a room where everybody gets smarter. That's what we're saying. So thank you very much, Melissa. You're going to get a CE credit for participating today. Number one. Number two, you're going to get a really short survey. Fill it out, send us back, tell us how we did, and tell us what you want to see in future Zoomcasts. We are going to be back on the 9th, 11th, and 17th of January with meaningful executive benefits. We've set a record today. We had about 152 people on the call, I think, which is incredible. So thank you all very much for participating. That's just awesome. Great conversation, great questions. I saw a lot of things in the chat box. So a lot of activity, and I think today was a great session. And Melissa, again, I can't thank you enough. On behalf of all of us at the Benefits Trust, it's now 11 o'clock. We're going to finish this session today. But if we're going to stick around, we're going to stick around for a few more minutes and answer any questions and have an offline discussion. But you're going to get your CE credit. So if you need to take off, take off. And again, on behalf of all of us, Mike, Carrie, Rob, and all of us at the Benefits Trust, thank you for your continued business. And if we're not doing business, we'd love to do business with you. We still have some inventory on the shelves for 2023, and we're fully stocked for 2024. So help us celebrate our 30th anniversary. And we wish everybody a safe and happy holiday season. That's the first time I've said it, and it's not December 1st yet. So anyways, again, Melissa, thank you very much. And if you want to stick around, but we'll stop recording at this moment. So have a great day, everyone.